Last time on Light in the D.
These are the critical years where you are post-adolescent, pre-adulthood, and you are making major life decisions with little to no experience in making those decisions. Who is my master? Who my mate might be? What is my major of study? Who is my master, or what is mastering me? Is something mastering me?
Right.
Other than the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, what is mastering my life? And is that going to set me off on a trajectory that when I'm in my late 20s or 30s or 40s, I've really distanced myself from Christ, or has it drawn me closer to him so that really all of my life has been lived to honor and glorify him? And they are critical, sobering years that students and parents need to pay attention to.
You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. I'm John Irvine, and welcome to Light in the D. Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Light in the D. I'm John Irvine. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're enjoying the content at Light in the D, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and or podcast on iTunes and where most podcasts can be found. Well, in today's episode, I'm going to wrap up my 4-part interview with Adam Barron. And if you're just tuning in, Adam is the Director of Community Engagement Strategy, Special Assistant to the President at Rochester University in Rochester, Michigan. And Adam is also the Founding Director of the Tatlow Society, which exists to strategically advance the mission expansion work of local, national, and international intercollegiate campus ministries. Well, today Adam's going to share more in depth about the Tatlow Society, as well as going to provide some valuable advice for Christian parents and children for higher education selection and planning. So here now is my wrap-up interview with Adam Barron. Well, I think this is a good point to talk about the Tatlow Society and why the Tatlow Society. Who was Tatlow? Let's start there.
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned, putting in my 10,000 hours. And there's, it takes at least, I've heard it said, I don't know if it was John Maxwell or someone else, that it takes at least 10,000 hours to start to become an expert at something, whether it's shooting a free throw or learning a foreign language or learning to fly a plane. You got to put in your 10,000 hours. So I think it's fair to say at this age and stage in my life, I've put in my 10,000 hours. I've worked at 4 different colleges and universities around the U.S. and 3 different parachurch ministries. So I worked at a school in Oregon, California, Chicago, and then here at Rochester University in Metro Detroit. I worked at an organization called the Veritas Forum. I was the Southwest Regional Director, putting on forums all across the Southwest from Mississippi to New Mexico, and big events at big universities like Texas A&M and the University of Texas Austin, and did that for a while. I also worked for a group out of England called the Alpha Course, and at the time it was with Alpha for Students. And in the UK, when you refer to students, you're referring typically to university students. So I worked with the Alpha team and the Alpha Course, helping chaplains and collegiate ministry leaders or students run Alpha courses amongst their peers. And then I also worked in Northern England at a Bible school called Cape and Ray Hall, which is a network of schools around 25 centers around the world. And I think that there's one more that I'm missing. But all that to say, I put in my hours and my time and my heart in this world and in this space. And I have a lot of education too. I'm a glutton for it, but it's always been birthed out of my own sense of curiosity and sense of calling and interest, particularly in the subject of university student ministries and the effect that they've had around the world in history and in the modern age. So that is kind of, that's sort of what's led up to the Tatlow Society. And along the way, when I was in England at King's College London, I came across the name of a man named Tissington Tatlow. And I was really struck by him. I've got actually here his 800-page book written in 1933 about the story of the student Christian movement, which is like the story of collegiate ministry, like we've been talking about in the UK. So 1933, he wrote this massive book about these movements happening in the UK. And he was an Irishman who was a contemporary of John Mott and a friend of John Mott.
Okay.
So he was, I like to say, in official roles, he worked in the student collegiate ministry world for 3 decades. And in unofficial ways, people often referred to him as the apostle to the student world. There's a story about his American contemporary, John Mott, who's definitely the more famous of the two, that Woodrow Wilson had asked John Mott to be the president of Princeton University. And John Mott said, "Thank you, Mr. President, but my university is the world. I don't want to be the president of just one school. My university is the world." In regards to Tissington Tatlow, people referred to him as the apostle to the student world. And so I've read about him. I've read his 800-page 1933 book. And then I came across a write-up that was more personal, a little biography written by a Welsh professor, maybe in like 1940, about Tissington Tatlow. And it just affirmed for me that everything that who he was and what he embodied, and his ability and his interests in engaging almost as an ambassador to this student world, whether he was building bridges with churches or building bridges within intercollegiate ministries that might differ with one another. He had a real heart and interest in, one, the student universe, and then two, how to engage other groups in that space. So I was just really struck by who he was as a person, and I wanted to honor him. So that's a little bit about the man, Tissington Tatlow. If you go to the website, which is abide.community, I think /Tatlow Society, you can read, there's a link there that gives you this little biography of Tissington Tatlow. And it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful little write-up about who he was as a person. So that was sort of point number one. Point number two, this idea of what is a society? In the early part of the 20th century, and probably even predating that, probably into the 19th century, really, whenever there was a robust student outreach and ministry at Ivy League schools, they tended to be what were called societies. Okay. They were a prayer society or a Bible reading society. And you would join these societies because that was something of interest to you. And so that, calling it the Tatlow Society, was me kind of tipping my hat to the man, as well as to these movements that had happened in the past. So there was Tissington, the man, the idea of establishing these societies, these special interest groups that care about a particular thing. And then, I've already talked about kind of my own background, but it was just that putting in those 10,000 hours and feeling like personally called at this moment and at this time in my life to establish something that would be able to engage broadly a lot of different collegiate ministry activity. So more specifically, it was really probably 2 years ago that I knew that my 30th anniversary of my own conversion was coming up. what would be the November of 2019.
Yeah.
So 30 years ago, 2019, in November, I gave my life to Christ. So before that, in the summer of 2016, or is that right? 2017, I started just to pray about that anniversary, saying, this is significant, this is important. And also praying like, God, is this, am I doing the thing you called me to do? It's almost like, having a marriage anniversary and saying, how are we doing? Let's take inventory and see how let's take personal inventory. And I was taking inventory of my faith walk. And I just knew that the Lord was saying, Adam, I really branded on your heart this collegiate ministry stuff. And so as I prayed about it, I had the good fortune of meeting a fellow named York Moore. York is the national evangelist and executive director of, I think, their mission expansion department at Inter-Varsity. And he is a Metro Detroit guy also. And York and I got together, and when we did, it was like two brothers from another mother. It was like a house on fire, because you were talking to someone who cared about what you cared about. C.S. Lewis said, when you meet a real friend, you know that they're a real friend when that other person says, oh, really, you too? Like, you like that also? I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And so York and I got together and we're talking about these things: collegiate ministries, student mission, revival, how revivals happened amongst university students. And I've got a story about that I can share, my own personal story of what I saw in 1995 amongst students at Wheaton College.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're getting together, we're talking about this stuff. And then he says, a year ago this month in January, he said, Adam, come to the national conference for Inter-Varsity in Orlando, Florida, pre-COVID lockdown. He said, come there. There's this thing called Every Campus, the Every Campus Collective. I'd love for you to be my guest and come be a part of and see what's going on. And so that was about a year ago this month that I was there with my family in Orlando. And I was in a room with maybe 100 other collegiate ministry leaders, a lot of the ones I've mentioned here. And I just thought, this is my tribe. These are my people. It's my squad. This is it.
Yeah.
And you're in the guild of amongst peers of people who really care about the things you care about. And it was beautiful. And out of that 4-day conference, a few different opportunities came to me to consider working at a few of these different large collegiate national ministries and international ministries, which just seemed right because I had worked at organizations like that before. And but in time, without going into all the details, it just seemed like it might be the right thing to do to establish the Tatlow Society, by which I could actually serve multiple organizations.
Yeah.
So in bringing my toolbox and my 10,000 hours, I could say, hey, how can I help you? Yeah. And so functionally, the last thing I'll say about and I'll give you some examples of what the Tatlow Society is doing. But functionally, the mission of the Tatlow Society is to strategically advance the mission expansion work of local, national, and international collegiate ministries. So whatever the society can do to advance other ministries, to the degree that we can be the seasoning or the spark plug, or that little bit of ingredients that helps to grease the wheels and advance what they're doing, that's the purpose of the society. And that might mean one-on-one coaching. So locally, there's we have Oakland University here in Oakland County, and there are different ministries there. Some of these larger established ministries, and some that are individually, there's a group of people working to share the gospel at a local university. I may come in and just provide some coaching and some pastoral care and encouragement in what they're doing. Then there's national things and international things also. But it's neat to see how in the last year, this prayerful evolution and movement towards bringing together my education, my experience, and my passion kind of all in one place, by which I can now kind of serve not just one institution or one organization, but several. And specifically, I think the things that I'm most excited about right now for the Tatlow Society is a partnership that I've been able to establish with Cru, Campus Crusade for Christ, and their mission expansion department, which is led by an executive director, a man named Dan Allen. So a year ago, early on, I was having conversations with the national director of Christian colleges with Cru, a man named Mike Whipple. He introduced me to his boss, Dan Allen, and we've subsequently kind of been in conversations and talking about how the Tatlow Society and my background and experience can help them grow their mission expansion work to faith-based schools in a way they've never targeted that before.
Okay.
So sometimes big organizations are awesome. They're like a big tanker moving across the Atlantic Ocean, and it can weather big storms because it's a big organization. But sometimes these big organizations aren't as nimble as a smaller organization, and the smaller organizations can kind of act as strategists or consultants, and be more of a tip of the spear and more quick to move and pivot in different directions, lining up with and fitting into the larger organizations while kind of being on the edge of the inside of it without fully being invested inside of it. And also the large groups have mission goals and strategic goals. And I can come alongside, and I'm coming alongside of the mission expansion department of Cru to help them think about and establish expansion work into faith-based schools around the country. So that's really, that's a project that could take several years. They are piloting things right now, and really the drive for them is kind of like that every campus collective. How can we help? How can we bring what we do really well into your ministry, and how can we help you effectively do that better?
Right.
A lot, whether it's a secular university or a faith-based university, every university across the country has financial challenges. COVID has had a huge effect on the college world, and schools in 2021 may close down. They may cut a lot of staff and faculty. They will have budget losses. And so it may be a moment, and a wise moment, for some of these faith-based schools to consider the idea of like outsourcing some of their efforts to engage and mentor and develop their students in partnership with these larger collegiate ministries that do what they do very well. They're very effective, and they've got a really good recipe. So the Tatlow Society kind of comes in between those organizations and kind of helps bridge activity there.
People are listening and they know someone, or they're part of or lead a collegiate ministry, and they're facing a lot of these challenges, like you just mentioned, COVID, school lockdowns, all these things, and they're thinking, man, I need some help. Should they reach out to you, or is there an ideal situation where it's like they'd be a perfect candidate to reach out to you and seek your help?
Well, there's no doubt that's what the Tatlow Society exists for. So certainly they can reach me at adam@the thetatlowsociety.org, all one word, thetatlowsociety.org, Adam at the Tatlow Society. They can reach out to me, and I'd love to talk to them and have a conversation about how the society can support them and help them do what they're doing. Absolutely. Whether that you be an individual, a church, or a parachurch ministry. That's what it exists for. And, this is what I think God's calling me into next, and where I can bring all the tools in the toolbox to affect change in some way through the society. So that's, and that can be, pastorally, one-to-one, mentoring, coaching, supporting existing collegiate ministry leaders, or thinking strategically about what they're doing and what I see happening in the larger, greater collegiate world. And so it's just been my pleasure and my interest to know these things and pursue these things over the last 25 years. And so I have a lot to say about it, and hopefully I can be helpful to others. Another example of something that the society is working on is, it's really neat because it's fun when very close friendships come together. And there is a college professor of mine named Dr. Jerry Root from Wheaton College. He's professor of evangelism and the director of the Evangelism Initiative at Wheaton College. Well, Jerry is kind of approaching retirement, and for maybe the last 15 plus years, he had been working really hard on a program that he created called the Evangelism Initiative. And it's been really an effort to try to enculturate at faith-based schools evangelism as part of the discipleship of students there. You can go to a Christian college anywhere across the country and get a very good education, and you can graduate from there saying, well, I'm a full-time Christian. I'm a professional, fully vetted now. I even got a bachelor's degree or a master's degree from a Christian college. My pedigree is crystal clear, and yet the actual piety, is particularly around evangelism, is often missing. They don't, and I would say at the beginning of the 21st century, if anything is true about young adults, and you see these in the statistics, that this is amongst Christian people, that they're slightly ambivalent about evangelism, and they're slightly unclear about, is it offensive to want to share your faith with someone else? And so the Evangelism Initiative, what Jerry at Wheaton was trying to establish and has been working to establish is to bring kind of a set of values and ideas by which a college, key administrators, faculty, students, and staff can kind of incubate this piety of evangelism in their own personal growth. And so Jerry has asked me to help him and to be a part of that as he starts to lean towards retirement and think about, doing other things, like who's going to continue to steward the Evangelism Initiative. And there are other people involved with it as well, but that's been something that really Jerry and I have been talking about for a year. And again, I think that's also part of how the Tatlow Society kind of came into existence, by which there could be this organization that can live out and engage these things, multiple things at the same time, not just one or the other, or just working at one school or another, but just doing many things at the same time.
I love it, and I think adults could use it too. I was just thinking, I've sensed, in my own walk, and it's 10 years since I was saved, that I witnessed, or lack thereof, discipleship in the church, and discipling people in how to evangelize, and just kind of keeping it in the four walls of their church and not sharing their faith. So I definitely think there's a great need for it. So with students, yeah, but also with adults.
Yeah. And I think, I think one of the last episodes we talked about where's the church in all of this?
Yeah.
And there are so many good churches around Metro Detroit, around the country, but churches are definitely understanding, like, they're going to have to think differently about themselves and their DNA, and as they've lived through this time of COVID, and I think too, it could be a unique moment by which in my reading of history amongst students and collegiate ministries, there were stronger ties with churches in the past than there are today. I think a lot of churches are worried about their brick and mortar and their programming and what they're doing. And it would be of great benefit to people who are really out on the front lines on university campuses doing evangelism and doing discipleship amongst the next generation of young adults. If there were 3, 4, or a collection of churches in any given region of the country or around the world that said, we are going to adopt those collegiate ministry leaders and ministries that are out there. We're going to adopt that local regional director and their team that are at campuses across Metro Detroit, for example, and we're going to support them financially. We're going to support them with prayer, and we're going to invite them into our community, that they're just not out there like a soldier behind enemy lines trying to fight their way across the French countryside to Berlin, but they know that there is like a mothership out in the English Channel, throwing bombs out in front of them and helping them move forward towards from D-Day to V-Day to Victory Day. And there's a lot of great, amazing people in college ministry that could get a lot of helpful support and encouragement if local churches just said, I'm going to adopt that person. We're going to adopt them and be a part of what they're a part of, because they really are out there on the cutting edge of evangelism, discipleship making, at the universities and colleges.
That's great. Listen, I would love to, support, continue to support you and what you're doing. And, I'm just starting this thing, Light in the D. I was collaborating with a friend yesterday who wants to get invested in Light in the D. And one of the things we were talking about was this whole idea of encouragement, evangelizing, which part of that is being a witness, sharing your testimony. And we were talking about making this more and more about, and you've done it, you shared your testimony, you witnessed to, how your walk with Christ and how you got to this point. What I would love to be is a resource for you as the Tatlow Society continues on and grows. I'd love to be a resource for you to share those stories, be a witness to what the Tatlow Society is doing. So if there are stories that you want to funnel through us at Light in the D, we can share that. And I think that's an encouragement to people to hear that, hey, you're not alone out there. And, as we were talking earlier, there's a lot of people going into, parents sending their kids off to school going, oh no, what's there for them, who are believers, and it's there, and be encouraged and know that, hey, God's not going to be thwarted. And there are great organizations out there like what you're doing in the Tatlow Society that can be a resource to families and their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the Tatlow Society serving collegiate ministry organizations and leadership, but certainly I love talking to parents. And I think the 17, 18-year-old thinking about going to college is not necessarily thinking like I do about these things. Typically, that's not the case. I realize now, looking back after over 30 years now, like I was a different kind of 18-year-old asking some pretty deep questions. That's not
you were. I wasn't asking those questions.
It's not atypical, right?
Right.
But that being said, parents are asking these questions. Parents are anxious, so they're wondering what's going to happen to Susie or Johnny when they go off to college.
Yeah.
And I really love talking to parents about this stuff. where you want your son or daughter to go, or where you want to help and encourage and coach them towards going. And everyone's different, and it's not one size fits all. Some kids will thrive better and their faith will grow in a more effective way at a secular school, and others, they will thrive and their faith will grow at a faith-based school in a more effective way. So I've got a 2-page list of questions, things to consider, books to read.
Awesome.
And I'd love to share that also with any parents out there who find interest. Just talk with me one-on-one, or come over to the house and sit with the family and Johnny or Susie and talk about what colleges are you applying to and why. Because I'm surprised at how few families actually do that. Like, and maybe they even sent their son or daughter to a parochial school in Metro Detroit, or one of the Christian schools like Oakland Christian or Bloomfield Christian, Southfield Christian, Plymouth Christian. They've spent money, time, and treasure for 12 years sending their son and daughter to a faith-based school. And then when it comes to one of the biggest decisions they may make as a young person with the coaching of mom and dad, they go to a really secular school. And they haven't really kind of critically thought about what the implications of what that might mean.
Yeah. And
then subsequently, you do hear these stories later on of like a lot of people kind of walking away from their faith, and you're like, wow, how did that actually happen? Like, where and when did that actually start to take place?
Right.
And so there are some ways in which families can think a little bit more critically about how to approach this topic and this subject.
Yeah. Hey man, that's awesome. And I'll make sure that we put all your contact information in the links below this video podcast. You've been a blessing, man. This is great.
Thanks a lot. Keep me posted.
I will.
All right.
Awesome,
Cheers.
brother. Take care. Cheers.